And we are live again one more time. Hey everybody, this is Tom, your ghost host, and this is Strange Journeys, a live stream podcast. Appreciate y'all being here. We already have some watchers, which reminds me, I will talk about that in a second. But anyway, this is Strange Journeys, and over on my left is Tim Shepard. We'll be talking to him in depth today on his books. Down below is Christine Rogers. She just had some oral surgery, so she's not up to talking, but she's hanging out with us. And then over on my lower left is my lovely wife, Lynn. We appreciate y'all being here and hanging out with us. And we want you to comment, get involved. Oh, somebody's already commented. Hey, Julie is back. Hey, Julie, I think you were with us last week with Elizabeth. Thank you for coming back. That's awesome. And Lynn was saying howdy to whoever's watching. But please do comment if there's something in the show you want to comment on. You are more than welcome. But also, we want you to comment on where you're watching from. And like I said, we're going to talk about you watching here in just a minute. I got something special, a surprise for everybody, just for the people watching. So we appreciate y'all being here. All right, we start every show with ET Facts. Okay, we've got some weird music playing again, Tim. Is that you again?
So grandfather clock is chiming.
Okay, all right, cool. Okay, hey, it's Strange Journeys, folks. Weird stuff, strange stuff happens on the show, which you're going to see in a minute. We had some strange stuff happen in the last show that was wild. So, but anyway, the ET Facts this week is what's one place, I thought about this is your bucket list. What's on your bucket list for investigations, paranormal investigations? What's one place that you would like to go to investigate? Let's start with Christine. Do you feel up to answering?
Yeah.
Okay. If you had an opportunity to go one place to investigate, where would it be?
Transylvania.
Okay. All right. So what's so intriguing about Transylvania that you'd want to investigate?
But there's castles, the history, the scenery. I mean, there's so much to explore.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Somebody did a show from there recently. Oh, there's Al. Hey, Al. Thanks for being there. Shout out to Al Luna and PSEI Paranormal Spirit Encounter Investigations. Let's see. All right. So Count Dracula doesn't have anything to do with that?
Not really. It's
okay.
everything I've heard from it, it just sounds like the place to go.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I saw one of those. Was it Ghost Hunters International or something? They were in a castle in Transylvania. And what's freaky about that is they, I don't know, Americans can be stupid when they get in a different country and they're doing EVP sessions in English. And I thought, you idiots.
Well, when I
If
went
there's
to
any
Russia,
spirits there, they didn't speak English.
when I went to Russia, we got to see some really interesting buildings and whatnot, and I'd love to go back there too. So
Oh, cool. Yes. Yeah, it's too cold for me.
it's not always cold. It was
Oh, well.
beautiful when I went.
Okay. Summer. We'll go in summer. Lynn, what about
You
you?
know where I want to go.
Yeah, I know.
I want to go to. I want to
Ireland.
go to Ireland. That's right. I want to see. I want to see a brownie.
A brown. I thought it would be a leprechaun since you're going to Ireland.
Well, brownies are there too.
Okay. All right. Just checking. All right, Tim.
I think I'd like to go to Pavia, Italy, is where I'd like to go. It's one of the most haunted places in the world. And it's a
Yeah.
little island off the coast of Italy. It was used as
Wow.
a plague island.
Yeah.
You've got
I've heard of
Ghost
that.
Adventures team went out there at one point, but it really, to me, that's like how to be fun. And you were talking about them doing EVPs in English
Yeah.
and trying to get EVPs. I know there was a show where they went to Pavia and they were getting answers back in English as well as in Italian.
I guess it's possible, but if they're in another realm, it's just
my upper torso.
huh? Upper torso. What? Who is talking? Okay. Julie said Romania would be a great place to investigate. That's a good one, Julie. Um, if you got any specific spots there, share those. But yeah, I mean, it just, I don't know. And I've seen some of those shows with investigating in different countries, and the EVPs they get are in different languages.
Right.
But it just seemed kind of idiotic to me to go into this European castle that they speak French or German, and the ghost hunters are speaking in English. It just kind of hit me funny. All right, for me, I'm going esoteric. I'm not going with a specific place, and I've said this for years. I want to investigate those places that have history, but one have not been investigated, and two don't have a lot of paranormal stories attached to them. I want to go. I like going to places that nobody else has investigated. I don't mind, and we've done this on occasion. Somebody, just back in November on the 13th, Friday the 13th, we did the investigation. A friend of mine said, "Would y'all like to come over and investigate?" And we said yes. But I like finding those places that haven't been investigated, like Waverly Hills Sanatorium. Everybody wants to go there. I don't. And it's not that I have any problems with it. It's a cool place and it'd be fun to visit and it'd be fun to see everything that happens there. But I want to go to those unknown places. So, like I said, kind of esoteric, not really specific. But if you're watching, we appreciate you. We got a bunch of people watching already, and that's awesome. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button. Hit subscribe and sign up for notifications and share this. If you're on Facebook, start a watch party. Oh no, they quit watch parties, Lynn. That's why it wouldn't let you do a watch party. Facebook stopped watch parties. I forgot about that. But share the live video and let folks see what's going on over here at Strange Journeys. And it takes some do-re-mi, a little bit of money to do this, and I don't mind doing it, and I enjoy it. That's why we do it in the first place. But if you can help us put this show together, we'd certainly appreciate it. Yeah, that's patreon.com/strange journeys, and you can help us out for as little as $3 a month. I support a couple of other podcasts on Patreon, and you get access to all kinds of stuff. As a matter of fact, the strange sightings videos that we do after the show, they're only available on Patreon. So if you want to go back and watch those, you have to sign up for Patreon. So that's the only place they're available after that. Now, I had mentioned I had something special for the folks watching. And what it is, how many of you ever heard of the Watchers? No?
We talking about from Highlander, the TV series, or something else?
We touched on it in the Angels show, Angels Among Us, back before Christmas. The Watchers are an ancient group of angels that watch over the planet. But they are also now the folks that watch our show. They are the Watchers. So that's what we're going to start calling you guys. You're the Watchers. And you're watching us. And I actually made up some T-shirts with your own little logo on there. You are the Watchers. And you can get those. Let me put this up there. If you use the code, Gina has heard of the Watchers. Well, you're one of the Watchers now because you're watching the show, Gina. But if you go to our Strange Journeys site, you can get there through our Strange Journeys Live, www.strangejourneyslive. You can get to our Strange Journeys stuff page, and you can get your own Watchers t-shirt. You are the Watchers. And we appreciate it. And that's why I'm doing this for you, so that you can get 15% off. Just use the code SJ15 for 15% off. Gina's no angel. Okay. Yeah, but you're a watcher now. You're watching the show, so you're a watcher now. All right. Previously on, Tim says, hello, everyone. Uh-oh, I'm sure Christine can show me how. Okay. She's calling you an angel. Let me put this up here. You can go to our strangejourneys.live and get to the show. Uh-oh. Julie says her horns show sometimes. All right. Previously on Strange Journeys, who remembers what we talked about in the last show?
The little people.
Yeah, it was our Fairy Tales 2 Leprechauns with Elizabeth Parker returning. She was with us on our Fairy Tales 1 and did a good overview. She didn't think she would be that knowledgeable, but I'm telling you, she educated us. Anybody have any thoughts or just feedback on that show?
there were too many strange things going on in the background, which I know we're going to talk about. But because was it Donnie with the Santa Claus and Mrs. Claus back behind him or whatever?
Well,
Yeah,
Donnie
it's probably time for me to take those down.
Donnie
If I
came
leave them
over to
long
our
enough, then
place.
they're just up early for Christmas next year.
Yeah, he was in our living room using the laptop, and and I'm sure Mr. and Miss Claus was a little distracting in the background, but just the fact that you know. It was a lighthearted show. It wasn't anything in depth. I mean, we did talk about the history of them a little bit, but Elizabeth going over the symbology and what we can take from that in our lives in regards to leprechauns. And the thing that she hit on, that she had mentioned this in the first show and she came back and reiterated again, is that these beings are in an alternate dimension. So if you don't believe in them, that's okay. If you do believe in them, that's okay. But there's a lot of hoaxes out there and people trying to, ooh, here's some leprechaun clothes and here's some leprechaun coins. And but the point is, if they're real, then they're actually from an alternate dimension, a different reality. They're not humans, folks. Elizabeth kept telling folks that they're not human. They are not human. But for our sightings portion of the show today, I wanted to go back and revisit a few minutes of that show because there, other than the Santa Claus, Mr. and Miss Santa Claus, there were some strange things happened. See what you think.
Leprechaun, but it is a serious disorder. It's rare, but it is called leprechaunism, also known as the Donahue syndrome, is an extremely rare disorder characterized by an abnormal resistance to insulin. Some researchers
Hey,
hope
Tom.
to see you again in 2 weeks. Yes, sir.
There's some right here that says Donnie is cute. I would like to go out with him.
No, I don't see that one. I missed that one, Donnie.
Oh,
Where
you
is
missed it. You missed it.
I missed it. Okay. We'll see y'all in 2 weeks. Thank y'all for being here.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Tom, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Tom, we can't hear you.
Oh, wow, there it is. All right. All right. Well, like I said, strange things happen on this show. You never know. And we lost Tim. So where's Tim? There he is. Okay. Flukes all over the place.
Right.
Wow. You disappeared and they couldn't hear me. So anyway, I won't go back and find it now. But during the Bridges show, Lynn and I had gone to Crybaby Bridge, and I took a series of pictures, and the very last picture showed a purple mist. And it reminded me of the Linda Godfrey, who wrote Beast of Bray Road, where she mentioned that I've seen this, I've heard her on a couple of podcasts, talk shows, and some documentaries where, as she was investigating the Beast of Bray Road, they would set up a trail cam with some kind of carcass, a deer carcass or something out there. And if, a local coyote drag it off, they'd see the coyote come up and drag it off. But there were times that it disappeared, but they wouldn't see anything but a purple mist. So it was just kind of wild that we had a purple mist show up on our show. So go back and check it out, folks. It starts about an hour and 15 minutes into the show, and just this purple mist showing up just to her right, and a white mist and rays. That could be sun coming in from a window. Okay, it was late in the afternoon, but it was just kind of weird. All right, today everybody knows we're talking about, it's our first in a series. We're going to be taking a strange author who's written books from a strange perspective. And Tim is our first one. Gina said she loves this. You can ignore me. I talk a lot. Okay. But thank you for coming. I'll try my best not to ignore you. All right. But we're starting our first series with our very own Tim Shepard. He's now down below me. All right, Tim Shepard lives in Kansas. Was it Burlingame?
Yes.
With his beautiful wife, Storm. He's a writer, historian, woodworker, jewelry maker, and avid gamer. He's also the owner of Ravenwind Tours, a historic and haunted history tour company. Most Friday and Saturday nights, you'll find him on the streets of Topeka. Well, not recently. Telling ghost stories and entertaining guests with odd bits of trivia. Now, Tim and I met, 2015? 14, 15, somewhere in there.
Somewhere
16.
in there, yeah.
Yeah. We were both working for a national tour company. It literally spanned from Washington State to Florida, and from Southern California to New York. We were, it was a big operation. Tim handled the tours in Topeka, right?
Topeka, yeah.
Yeah. I did the tour in Mobile, and I moved up in the company. I don't know what Tim's deal was. He just stayed right there. I worked for the home office in Mobile, but I worked for the home office as a Eastern region regional manager and also training new tour guides. But Tim had one of the most successful tours in that company. When the company broke up, they allowed us to continue our tours, and I changed the name of mine to Strange Journeys. Tim changed the name of his to Ravenwind Tours. And He's already expanded into Lawrence. You got Topeka and Lawrence right now, right?
Topeka and Lawrence, yes.
Okay. Well, tell us a little bit about Ravenwind Tours. We're going to get into the stories in a little bit, but how that all started and came to be.
Like you said, we both started with the same company, and I know when I was hired, Kit Rasmussen, who's been on the show with us several times, was
Yeah.
actually the manager that hired me, and he sends me the very first script, and it was something else. I'll tell you that right now, because it was like you don't have anything from the city we're in, and you've got to,
Exactly.
you know. So I
I
went in there.
rewrote, Tim. I rewrote every script that they sent me when I was
Right.
training the tour guides, because I'm like, just don't have. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
Right. So I rewrote the first script and changed it around to be what I wanted it to be,
Right.
and even took the route a different direction. When we started Ravenwind Tours, we were actually operating in um, South Topeka, around the capital area, and we actually had two haunted history tours there. And then we opened up in North Topeka on the north side of the river and had one tour there. We currently run a total of 5 different haunted history tours in the city of
Wow.
Topeka, um, 2 tours in Lawrence. So we've expanded a huge amount. Right
Good.
now, I'm working on completing a historic only tour for the city of Lawrence.
Uh-oh. Tim, you froze.
Mile route.
There we go.
So, but we'll see what happens there if we can get that going this summer. It is looking like we're going to be able to reopen come May, which would be
Good.
fantastic.
Yeah, I'm sure. We're all hoping for that.
Right.
Yeah. Well, all right. Well, to back up a little bit, what got you into writing?
I
Because
started
I know
writing.
you had to do research to do the tour.
Right.
So, what got you into writing and putting all this together?
I started writing real early on. I think I was about 18 years old or so. Wrote fantasy and sci-fi for a very long time. Have been published in both. I still have copies of the original novels that I wrote. There were 7 of them that were never
Wow.
published. And I look back and go, man, those are crummy. That sounds bad, but it's like, oh man, I was a horrible writer. And there are times I think, oh, I need to go back and redo those. But that's really what got me started, was that interest in that. Um, I had never intended to write a book of ghost stories. Let's make that very clear. 4 years ago, somebody on a tour, people on tours kept saying, "Oh, you need to write a book." Okay, so finally I broke down and did one. My wife and I had been doing lots of research in the paranormal group we were with, and gathered all kinds of information. I sat down to write the first book, which was Prairie Ghosts, um, and had so much in there that I was like, oh, I'm going to have to write a second one. That's how we wind up with Return to the Prairie. It's like, okay, let's go back and look at this. But we'd spent years researching the history behind it, and what all was happening, and the different areas.
Well, you kind of answered the next several questions already.
Right.
I mean, you just went on ahead. What's the very first thing you remember writing? I'm not talking about in grade school, learning to write, but I mean, you actually actively sat down to write a poem, short story, whatever. What was it?
I actually sat down to write. The first book was called Strange Blood. It's a high fantasy, and I wrote it from beginning to end. And it was fun to sit there with an old typewriter, back when you were pounding the keys.
Wow. And you still have it?
I still have it. So,
Cool.
and I keep thinking, well, maybe I need to go back and redo that. And I look at them now and go, man, those are horrible. What was I thinking?
Well, I mean, the songwriting, I looked at some of my first songs and I'm like, oh, that was crap. But at the time, I loved it.
Right.
I thought they were awesome, and I was sharing them with everybody. So
right.
I don't know if you actually shared your stories, your book with anybody.
Right.
But yeah, some of those songs I never do, but some of them I still pull out from time to time. And you might find that you can make revisions to it and update
Right.
it. But your first book, basically, you took a compilation of the stories you've been researching for your tours, right?
Actually, we took a compilation of the stories that I'd been doing for the tours, as well as other things that we'd researched throughout the state of Kansas, and
Yeah,
added it kind of all together. And I was like, man, there's so much more here. Um,
true. Well, see, that's the thing on when we were with that company and I was training the tour guides, our number one focus was the tour route.
right.
What happened in this area that I can talk about? And then outside of that, we would look, within the city. And then
Exactly.
outside of that, our third priority was in, outside the area, but our first priority was, and I showed
Right.
this, but this is one of the covers for your book. That's not the one I've got. Here's
Yeah.
the one I've got.
Yeah. I was going to say, this is the cover now.
Yeah. Okay. So the title, Prairie Ghost. Where did that come from?
I think I was just looking at, most people when they think of Kansas, and I asked this question on lots of tours, what's the first thing that people think of when they think of Kansas? It's always got to do with Wizard of Oz. And oh, everybody knows that. And I was like, you know what,
Yeah.
there's more to it than this. We've got this wide open stretch of prairie that is out here. Um, and I really just wanted to emphasize, we have this huge history because Kansas is a prairie. It was where, you know, we consider it a flyover state now, but it was a
Yeah.
travel through state.
Oh, he locked up again.
Um,
You keep
from
freezing every now
Atchison
and
and move out.
then. You freeze up every now and then. So it was actually people on tour that I mean, because we saw this on our tour as well. I mean, Lynn would come up to me after the tour. So and so said you need to write a book about all this,
Right.
and I never have. Um, Gina said Dorothy's incredible. It's where her magical journey started. Well, you're going to hear a lot more from the land of Dorothy
Right.
before this show's over. In an overview of the book, and I say overview, what kind of stories are they? Legends, urban legends, ghost tales? What?
I have
Just a
this
general
interest
idea.
in the because I'm a historian, I like the history background of it. I want to know what really happened because you
Right.
do get these urban legends, the car being scratched by a hook you know, and so I wanted to know really what are the real stories that are out there? Where did this go?
He keeps freezing. He froze up again.
Um, so yeah, I want to know the history behind the ghosts. What's the real
Yeah.
reason that they're there? You know,
Well, yeah, I noticed that in a lot of the stories, you would go into detail on who the spirit may be and what happened.
right.
Uh, Before we get into some specific stories, give us a brief history. I mean, a brief history of Kansas because it ain't brief.
No, it's not brief at all. Kansas opens up. Really, the Civil War started in 1854. We talk about it starting in 1861, but that's not true. Here in Kansas, you have what we call the Bleeding Kansas because it begins when Kansas Territory opens in 1854. There's a huge fight over slavery, whether Kansas is going to enter the United States as a slave state or as a free state.
Right.
And it's bloody. Estimates put it upward of 2,000 people that would die over the issue of slavery in the state of Kansas. It's massive. Um,
Mhm.
and what happens, of course, Kansas does enter as a free state in 1861. There's a huge amount of history that comes after that because you have places like Fort Leavenworth, Fort Riley, Fort Dodge, all of which were set out there to protect the people
Right. Yeah.
um, that were traveling westward because all three of the trails came through Kansas. In fact, the little town that I live in was one of the hubs of the Santa Fe Trail. It was the only place where
Huh.
the Santa Fe Trail crossed the railroads.
Huh.
And so at one point, there were 30,000 people living in the town I live in. We're down to less
Wow.
than 1,200 now.
Wow.
So you can
God.
imagine how much it's changed over time. Um, but there's so much history that is out there because you have the Indian Wars happening here. You have men like Dwight D. Eisenhower living here. George Armstrong Custer lived here for a time. Um, Buffalo Bill Cody actually started the town of Overland Park, Kansas, which is about an hour from where I live.
Wow.
I mean, there were just huge amounts of history that is out there.
Oh God, yes. That's what I say. We don't have a lot of we don't have a lot of time for that. Well, in the book, do you have like as people read the book, they come back with their top tales. What people your feedback has gotten you? What's the most popular?
Um, some of the things that people that I get feedback with is the story of Stoll, Kansas,
Uh
and the
huh.
albino woman. We'll talk about both of those. Stoll, Kansas is a legend. Let's make it very clear. And this is why I really got into researching the history that goes on. According to legend, what happens is on October 31st every year, the devil shows up in Stoll, Kansas,
Whoa.
inside of a church that was sitting in the cemetery.
In a church.
Inside of a church that was sitting in the middle of the cemetery. Um, Now, what happens though is that, and this is, and everybody talks about the ghosts. They want to know what ghosts are there. Okay, the devil's there, but what else happens? And so I started researching this, and what I found out was that in 1972, an anthropology professor from the University of Kansas in Lawrence, Kansas, wrote an article about how the devil would appear every year in Stoll, Kansas. He
Wow.
referenced a newspaper from 1922 and a Time magazine article from 1954. Neither of his references exist. It was an
Wow.
anthropology experiment to see what would happen.
But
Oh.
see, now on Supernatural, they said the devil can't go in a church.
Right,
Now, I know from experience that the devil can walk right up in there because I have
right,
seen,
right,
but they said he couldn't go in there.
right. And so what happens is that the first year about 15 or 20 people show up. The
Yeah.
second year there are more than 250 people that go to the Stoll Cemetery.
Wow.
The third year, there are 2,500 people in the cemetery.
Wow.
Stoll, Kansas has now put a fence around it, and there are no trespassing signs all around the cemetery.
Holy cow.
They've also leveled the church and filled the stairs that went into the church's basement in so that nobody can go in there because supposedly if you went down the stairs, you could go all the way down to one of the gates of hell.
Oh, great. And it was just an anthropology experiment.
Exactly.
Some people.
Right.
I
And
mean, even when he makes it known, people still show up thinking that the devil's
right.
going to show
Exactly.
up.
And so that's why I really want to go, okay, what's the true history? What really
Yeah,
happened there? How did they get involved in that? You know?
yeah. And I guess you could say mythologically, there's no reason for the devil to be showing up in Stoll, Kansas, right?
Right,
I
exactly.
mean, it's like what, even in a paranormal history, what's he got in Stoll, Kansas? You know?
Supposedly, according to the legend, he married a witch there, and she was buried in that cemetery. Now, there
Oh,
is a
wow.
tombstone in there that it is somebody named Witch, but it's spelled Witich, but it was pronounced Witch.
It
It
sounds
was
more like
not a
witch.
witch. You know?
No.
So the devil married a witch, and
Right,
she was buried in the cemetery, and he came back every Halloween to see her.
right, exactly. It's like,
Okay.
And a guy just made it up to see what would happen.
And
Wow.
people
exactly.
believed it.
And people are still believing it. You know,
Uh,
you talked about supernatural. The reason that they put the boys from Lawrence is Stoll is literally about 15 minutes away. So,
wow. And then you said the albino woman. This was I remember reading the history. The, to me, is just so, what's the word I'm looking for? Inspirational.
Right.
You know, and the fact that they've made an urban legend and ghost story out of it, to me, kind of demeaning to the actual truth.
What happens with that is there's lots of twisting that happens over the years with
Oh
that
yeah.
story. Now, she was a real resident of the city of Topeka, and she was an albino. She was a black woman that had white skin. She was
Yeah.
born that way.
But an
And
albino, it's really white. I mean, it's not
right,
Caucasian white.
right. It's really
It's
white. In
really
fact,
white.
even normal sunlight would actually burn her
Hmm.
skin to
Yeah.
the
I
point
mean,
that
it's
she get,
white.
yeah, third-degree burns just being out in normal sunlight if she wasn't covered up.
Well, it's not
Um,
just African Americans that can be
right,
albino white. It
Right.
can be
right,
My
just about
cousin
any
is
race.
albino, and she goes out in the sun and that kind of thing, but she, for probably the first 50 years of her life, couldn't even get color to stay in her hair. It was
right,
the most beautiful white you'd ever
right.
seen.
Yeah,
But she has no pigment. Her eyes were red. She's, the color of her skin. And 10 minutes outside, and she would be blistered.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah. So it was a really tough situation that she was going through. Um, but she arrives in the city of Topeka in 1923. And her whole reason for coming to Topeka is that there was an albino colony in southeastern Kansas that she was from. And she came to Topeka because at the time, all the circus and carnival trains would come through Topeka. Because it is, of course, the home of the Santa Fe Railroad is right inside the city of Topeka, too. So she
Hmm.
always planned on joining a carnival or circus. And we know that that big portion that they used to call the freak show or the sideshow that was off to the side, those people made more money than the ones that were performing in the tent.
Yeah.
Um, but nobody ever hired her. Because at the time, albinism was something that they faked on a regular basis for carnivals
Oh
and
yeah.
circuses. And what they would do is they would bleach the hair white, and then they would take a white pasty makeup and put it over the skin. And then, of all the things to do, they would take onion powder and stick it in the eyes until the eyes would
To
turn
make them
pink.
red.
I,
Ow.
I can't even imagine doing that or how
Man.
painful that would be. Um,
Wow.
i- Instead, she actually attends the Stormont School of Nursing, and we call it Stormont Vale Healthcare Systems today. It's still in existence,
Wow.
where she became a pediatric nurse. Now, lived in North Topeka, but she would come into the city itself on the south side of the river every day to come to work. She came in the afternoons. She would ride the trolley down, usually wearing long sleeves and a huge bonnet. And gloves to keep everything covered up as she came down. And then she would catch the last trolley into North Topeka and walk the rest of the way home, about 3 miles
Mm.
home across an area called Soldier Creek into North Topeka. She died in 1967. And the very year that she died, they started seeing her ghost within
Wow.
days of her dying. And the story started circulating that they were seeing her there, particularly at a place called the Cloverleaf Drive-In that doesn't exist anymore. It was on the corner of Highway 24 and Topeka Avenue, and they would see her underneath the drive-through screen, and she would wave to people in their cars as they were sitting there, people she had
Wow.
known in life. In 1972, there's an incident with a little boy that is in a store called Pelletiers. And she is standing there. He thinks it's a mannequin until it turns to reach out for him and he starts screaming. The shopkeeper knew what was going on and said, "You need to leave the building." And it actually walked right through the plate glass window and out onto Kansas Avenue and then finally disappeared after walking down the street a little ways. It's
Wow.
been seen in multiple houses, usually with children that were sick, which was kind of a surprising to
Yeah.
me is that most often the stories that I think are a little bit more believable are the ones where it's actually visiting a child that is sick because
Well, I mean, yeah,
she
that's what
was a
she
nurse.
did. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I mean, because like I said, it was, to me, it was like an inspirational thing
right,
that she worked. I mean, she with kids, but she would have to just basically cover up, not to hide
right,
or because she was ugly,
no,
so that she wouldn't burn.
no,
But she risked that to go work with the kids
right,
every day.
exactly.
until she
every day.
died. And she lived to be quite an old woman, didn't she?
She was in her 80s when she passed.
Yeah.
She would actually walk through the Rochester Cemetery. Now, Topeka,
Yeah.
it's illegal to go into the cemeteries at night because of Rochester. Because the local teenagers, after the ghost started showing up, they thought, "Oh, we can see her in the Rochester Cemetery because that's where she was buried." But she
Mm.
did walk through the Rochester Cemetery every night because her husband and son were both buried there in 1944. The husband died of a heart attack, and the son was killed during World War II, and they
Wow.
brought his body back and buried him here in the city of Topeka.
Wow.
So she would stop every night to visit their graves.
Amazing. And then, it just the fact that people still see her. It could
Right.
be, I mean, these are
Right.
sightings still going on to this day, right?
There are still sightings going on to this day. I tell people on tours, don't go look for her in the Topeka Cemetery. Take a walk along Soldier Creek because that's where she's most often seen is along
Wow.
Soldier Creek, walking beside the same route that she walked in life. And she'll
Yeah.
stop and wave to people and say hello. It
Wow.
amazes people because she's a full body apparition. She
Yeah.
appears very much like a person. And when I first started hearing about it and really did a lot of research, I found out that during that time period in the 60s, there were a total of 4 albinos living in Topeka.
Okay.
Um, she had two nieces that were both albinos. Um, her brother claimed that one of the albinos is pictured in a picture that is now in the Brown versus the Board of Education National Museum.
He
Leslie was
locked up again.
7 years old when that was taken.
Uh,
Um, but there was a fourth one as well in the 60s.
did you
So
ever come across her name?
I know her name. Um, I did some interviews with her brother, but I have on the family's request have don't tell anybody. You know,
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
yeah,
I think I remember you saying that in the book.
yeah,
Yeah, that they didn't want her name released.
right,
And so now the $1 million question: have you ever seen her?
yes. So, and it's right along that Soldier Creek area, and so she's really amazing to see when she's out there. So because
So
it's
tell us
neat.
about that. Tell us about that sighting, Tim. Don't just gloss over it now.
You my experience with that is that she was walking along the creek,
Yeah,
and I was just trying to. I caught a glimpse of her. My sighting was not great, but to me, it was
yeah.
like this is the proof that she's still out here, that she's still walking along, still making herself known. So
Oh, good, good. All right, and one of your other popular tales is the Kansas Capitol. What about the Kansas Capitol that makes it so popular?
the Kansas State Capitol is actually built. They start building it in 1861. They finish the main portion of the building and they give up for 8 years. Um, if you go on tours of the Capitol now, they will not tell you any ghost stories from the Kansas Capitol. There are as many as 11 spirits though inside the building. Um, it has a
Wow.
very interesting history. The Kansas State Capitol has the only capitol in the United States that has a mass murderer and convicted treasonist painted as a mural on the wall because we've got a huge painting of John Brown
Uh-huh.
on the
Yep.
second floor of the Capitol. In 1967, there's a lady that commits suicide inside the Kansas State Capitol
Uh-huh.
building. On July 11th, she's taking a tour of the Capitol. She is about 100.
Oh, he locked up again.
It's a pillar that she braces herself on as she climbs up on the rail. She places her shoes on the underneath the rail and she jumps. Um, as she is falling, she doesn't scream at all. In fact, there was a janitor mopping the floor downside inside the rotunda. And if she had not hit the second floor balcony railing, she would have killed him on the way down. She actually hits the second floor balcony. She bounces off of that. She takes off her left arm. She hits his mop bucket, which back then was metal, and scraped the right side of the face all the way down to the bone. She is still seen inside the
Wow.
Kansas Capitol to this day, usually walking along muttering to herself.
Huh.
Um, We've got a senator from here in Kansas, one of the state senators, that won't work in his office by himself late at night because his office is the original bank vault for the city of Topeka. And he was working late one evening as she tried to push the bank vault door closed
Oh,
on him. He
no.
jumped up and ran around and grabbed the door, and it was actually swinging. At which point they found
Oh.
out they don't even have the combination to that safe anymore.
Woo.
So it would have been a long time cutting him out of his own office. But he
Yeah.
won't work by
Oh,
himself for
wow.
fear of seeing him. Um,
And that janitor.
right.
Yeah, I thought it was. I'm sorry, I just had to laugh when he was like, "Nope, I'm done."
Yeah. He
And
walks
he leaves.
he goes home after the suicide. He comes back the next time that he has to come into work, and he says as he's walking in, he sees her standing in the very spot that she hit the floor.
Uh-huh.
And he said, I'm not working here anymore. I need to be transferred to a different building. Now, the interesting part about that is they actually only transfer him to an office building across the street. He,
Yeah.
he's not even a block away from where it is. And he
Wow.
retired in 2000, I think it's 2007 he retires. And the Kansas state governor requested his presence at the Capitol building to present him with
Uh-huh.
this award for the number of years that he'd worked for the state of Kansas, because he'd worked for them more than 50 years. And he refused to come to the Capitol building. He made the governor come to him in the other building because he didn't want to encounter the ghost that was inside the Capitol building.
No, but that and then like I said, when it happened, when she fell and everything was, he was like, "I'm out.
No, I'm done. I'm going home."
I am not mopping that floor."
Right. So
All right, and all right, from the book, your favorite story.
um, honestly, I like the stories of the Jayhawk Theater the most. The Jayhawk Theater is a historic theater in Topeka. It's built in 1925. It was the first theater in the United States to have central heat and central air conditioning.
Wow.
Now, to let you know what central air conditioning was, in 1925, they took a giant block of ice and blew the condensation through the building with fans. It has done a
Yeah,
huge amount of damage to the building. They're in the
I
process
bet.
of renovating it now, but the cost is somewhere near $6 million. It's going to be a massive project to undergo.
Must have been mold and mildew everywhere.
Uh, they stopped using it finally in like 1988 was
Yeah.
the year they quit using it. The group that is redoing the building is doing a great job. But over the years, you have a suicide that happens there. You
Yeah.
have a stage manager who dies of a heart attack on the stage late at night by himself.
Wow.
You've got a homeless guy that commits or that dies of exposure in the alley right behind it. That would be 2012, I think, is when he passes away.
Man.
So you've got lots of spirits that are traveling through there. And as I'm out doing tours, it's lots of fun when I get to the Jayhawk Theater and I'm telling stories, especially if there's an
Yeah.
event going on, because the people inside the Jayhawk Theater will come out and tell their experiences
Oh,
to the
cool.
people. And one of the first instances this happened to me, I was actually out there and I'm telling about the ghost of the lady that committed suicide inside the building. In 1933, she commits suicide inside the Jayhawk Theater. She was part of a traveling musical that came through the city of Topeka, and she was released from the theater company when they got to the city of Topeka. She had just found out that she was pregnant. She was an unwed mother,
Ooh.
and in the 30s, that was frowned upon completely. And so,
Yeah.
for whatever reason, she decides to commit suicide inside the Jayhawk Theater. She's staying inside the Jayhawk Hotel, which is right next door. There are no locks between the two buildings. She enters the building, goes up in the balcony, and jumps from the balcony into the chairs below. It's about a
Yeah.
40-foot drop, but the impact did not kill her. She hit the chairs below, and they say it took
Oh
anywhere for 3 to 4 hours for her to bleed out on
Oh,
the floor.
God.
Um,
no.
and so
Holy cow.
That would
um,
have been horrible.
the upper offices of the building now belong to the Kansas Department of Corrections. And one of the officers that works in that building says that he will not he will not ride the elevators. The very first day he went to work, he gets in the elevators and the doors closed. And he could hear a woman sobbing in the elevator right next to him. He looks over and there's nobody there. He walks up and down all the flights of stairs now. He's been there for about 15 years now. Goes up and down every flight of steps because he does not want to encounter it. He says if somebody is
Wow.
crying in the building down the hall, he will send somebody else out. You go look. Um, um,
Oh, wow.
now,
Oh, God.
what we've experienced with the tours is we actually have an incident here, would be almost 2 years ago now, where two of the guys were going through and they were just making sure that everybody was gone at the end of the night. And one of them saw a woman wearing a black dress run up the stairs, and he's like, well, "What in the world?" But the chain to the balcony level was still in place, and it was swinging back and forth, which it shouldn't have been doing. And he
Uh-oh.
said that he heard somebody yell, and he and the other guy went up the opposite stairs to get up to the balcony level, and there was nobody up there that they could find. They went through the
Wow.
bathrooms and everything up there. And so they're like, the first time one of them heard me tell that story, is like, that's her. That's the woman that I keep seeing inside this building. So,
Wow. So that you actually have people on the tour that have worked there?
right.
Yeah.
Yes, we do. So it's lots of fun. That they come out and they'll visit with us when they're in there. The Jayhawk Theater is doing about 2 or 3 events inside the building per month at
Yeah.
this point, trying to raise the money so that they can do the rest of the renovations that they're doing. I know that
Yeah.
yesterday they were talking about newspapers were talking about the foundation. They're going to redo the foundation this summer. They're looking at $180,000 to redo the foundation of the theater.
Wow. Whew.
So
Yeah, we had a similar thing on tour one night. We were at the Battle House Hotel, and turns out that one of the people on the tour had worked at the Battle House and was able to give us a few stories from there.
right.
All right, well, a couple of things from the book that I wanted to go over before we get to the next book. And folks, the reason we're doing this is one, to share these creepy stories with you, but two, so that you can go to Amazon and find his books. All right, there's there at Amazon, and just type in his name, Tim Shepard, and look
Right.
for Prairie Ghost or Return to the Prairie, which we'll be talking about some of the Return to the Prairie stories in just a minute here. But one, there was a few in the book that to me had kind of a national or international feel to it,
Right.
not feel, connection. Um, and this one was from, I mean, we've all heard the name Anastasia. And the story of Anastasia has a connection to Kansas.
Yes, it does. Um, Topeka in the early portion of the 19th century had a huge Russian influx. In fact, we have an area that we call Little Russia to this day.
Yeah.
Um, and what happens is that there's a group of Russians that come in right around just shortly after the events that happen in Russia with the Bolshevik Revolution. And some of these people say they see Anastasia among them. Um, but this group did not set up in Little Russia. In fact, they set up about 2 miles outside of the city of Topeka to the west, and they built these two beautiful buildings that are still standing today. One of which has the minuet towers on the side of it. I mean, it's really neat to
Wow.
see. Um, and they were out there for about a year to a year and a half that they were at that location. Every time that they would go into town to deal with the markets and stuff, this woman would go with them. But if she was there and anybody tried to approach her, there were armed men with her that would get people to back away from her. What happens though is that somebody from the city of Topeka, which is still not that far out, outside of, it hasn't expanded that far to where the houses were located, notices that there is no smoke coming from that area. Nothing is burning. They're not cooking anything. And so they call the local sheriff to go out and investigate. And he sends 2 deputies out there. And when they get there to the houses, they discover a huge amount of blood that is inside one of the houses. They also,
Wow.
at this point, they bring in more officers to investigate. And they discovered that there are tunnels running away from these houses. as far as the Kansas River to the north, which is about a mile and a half, as far south as what is now the Westridge Mall, which is about a mile away, they'd have built escape tunnels outside of these buildings.
Huh.
And the thought among some people that have got the wonderful conspiracy theory was that Anastasia was here at some point and they were protecting her. That was the only reason
Wow.
that anybody can think they built those escape tunnels the way that they did.
Well, the timing of it too, because
Right,
this was right
exactly.
after the revolution, right?
Yeah, this is right after the revolution.
And it was
So,
thought that they escaped. Now,
right.
supposedly, some bones that were discovered in Russia, we had DNA testing, and they
Right.
feel like they have discovered her bones that she actually died in Russia during the revolution.
Russia says that they have it. The scientist that was in charge of that says that none of those bones are Anastasia's.
Ah,
He says it's not her. That she
okay.
didn't die there, but there were
Uh-oh.
538. They where they're at.
Okay. You froze up again.
Yeah.
So what was it? Repeat that because you froze
So
up.
there are 58 total members of that family that die
Mhm.
or disappear. They've identified 38 of the bodies. Their bodies, they have no idea where they are. And so this scientist is saying Anastasia is not among the bones we found. Um,
Oh. But the official stance
from Russia
from the
is that she's
government
dead. Yeah,
is that
is
she
that
is
she's
dead.
dead and they have her body.
But the scientists don't
Right,
necessarily believe that.
right.
So there's a possibility that could have been.
Yeah,
And
could have
Well,
been
for
her.
how many years did her grandmother look for? So
Yeah,
she was one who believed that the child was still alive, that she
yeah,
had never,
yeah.
yeah,
otherwise she wouldn't have been looking.
yeah, exactly.
Any thoughts or ideas of where they went to after that, after they disappeared?
Due to the amount of blood that they talk about inside the houses, uh, there's a possibility those, if they killed people, whoever came and did that, killed people inside the building, those bodies could be anywhere. They
Okay,
may have
so
gotten away.
yeah, they may have gotten away or they may have been
Yeah,
slaughtered there by,
right,
yeah. Okay. But yeah, I thought that was unique about the
right,
tunnels
right,
going all over the place. So they had plenty of
exactly.
escape routes. So maybe they made it out. And there was one lady that died, just a few years back, who always said she was Anastasia, but
Right,
when she died, they did a final DNA test and it didn't
right,
match up.
right.
So, but all right, before we go on to the next book, I did want to touch on two more things before we go to the next book. The BTK killer.
Right. Dennis Rader. He is, at one point, they consider him one of the most prolific serial killers in the state of
Right.
Kansas. We've had more than our fair share. Let's make that very clear. Um, what happens is he's actually a resident of the city of Wichita, Kansas. He is worked for the airlines for a little while at Boeing, helping put planes together. He put in security systems in people's houses. For
Yeah.
whatever reason, in the 80s, he decides at one point while he's unemployed, he sees a woman and her daughter walking down the street, and he begins stalking her for a period of about 6 weeks prior to breaking into the house. He thinks the husband and the son have left. When he breaks into the house, he finds out the husband and son are home. He kills the husband first. The killing of the husband took time. He strangled him, thought he was dead. The husband started moving, strangled him a second time. In the meantime, he's bound the son and he's bound the daughter and the wife. Um, he will eventually kill the son with a hammer.
Ew.
He strangles the husband. He takes the daughter downstairs in the house and tortures her down there for hours before she dies. The mother dies in the bed upstairs. Um, he will go on to kill 8 more people during the next 20 years. It's interesting because he got away with it in the 80s, and it isn't until the 2000s when he kills the two victims in the 2000s that he makes a reappearance.
Yeah.
And when he does, he starts taunting the police. I've gotten
Writing
away
them
with it for
letters.
so long, I'm going to
Yeah.
keep getting away with it. It gets him caught eventually because he uses, of all things, he's a deacon in a church, and he uses
Yep.
the church's computer to make a disc recording of what he's done.
Oh my gosh.
So
Now, BTK stood for
bind, torture, kill.
Yeah,
Kill.
bind, torture, and kill.
Right.
Wow.
Now, he never raped any of his victims, but he was definitely good at torturing the victims before they would die.
Gosh. All right. We're going to go on to your next book here. Let you go over some of the stories there. Return to the Prairie. Now, you had mentioned that you just had so many stories, you decided you had to make it, you had to come back with
Right.
technically not necessarily a sequel, but almost a
Right.
continuation.
Right.
Book 2 in the series. So
In
what's
particular, I
go
wanted to
ahead.
look at Fort Riley in particular and Lawrence, Kansas, as we were preparing for the Lawrence tours.
Yeah.
We had lots of information there, but I wanted to look at Fort Riley, mostly because you've got the Custer House on Fort Riley, which the one they're using as a Custer House was George Armstrong Custer never lived in it. Let's make that very clear. We talk about the parade
Yeah.
grounds, the ghosts of the parade grounds, and residents around the parade grounds still say there is a group of soldiers that will come riding in, and they will
Yeah.
arrive, cavalrymen, and they will rush into a house that is believed to actually have been the one Custer lived in while he was at Fort Riley. And there is an incident while he's at Fort Riley. He's supposed to be fighting the Indian Wars in Colorado. He leaves for no apparent reason. He would actually get court-martialed for this and comes all the way back to Kansas. And when they rode in, he and the 4 or 5 men that were with him right inside the house had to do something with the cholera epidemic that was happening at the time period. And so it's a residual haunting where it's just that memory that is playing itself over and over and over again
Right.
of them riding into the parade ground and entering the house. The Custer House itself is this really unique place. It's a beautiful building. It's all original limestone from here in Kansas. It's a 3-story structure. They've got a ghost inside the Custer House that, because it is used as a museum, they've got a room for children that would be a child's bedroom that has an old wooden rocking horse in it, as well as old stuffed animals. And on camera, beginning in about I want to say as early as the 1980s, they caught it on camera, where the teddy bear would get up off the bed and float across the room and would sit on
Wow.
the rocking chair and rock back and forth as if a child were playing with it. Um, and what got him to look at it was that the curator of the museum kept coming in, and the teddy bear would be on the floor. And he knew that he was putting the teddy bear on the
Yeah.
bed each evening to make sure that it was there. And so they eventually recorded what was happening.
Yeah.
And it's happened over and over again that they continue to record it every few years, where that teddy bear is moving across the room and will sit, and the rocking chair is just moving back and forth.
Holy cow.
So
Where can you find that video?
I've seen one on YouTube, so you can certainly look that up for Fort Riley
Yeah.
Ghost. I know that at one point here recently, Fort Riley pulled down all their videos temporarily
Yeah.
while they were redoing the Custer House and the World War II Museum, or U.S. Cavalry Museum, were both being remodeled last year, and so they pulled things down. I haven't looked to see if they put them back up yet. That'd be neat to see, but I need to check on that.
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, what are some of the other top stories in that Return to the Prairie?
We talk about Building 99 or Quarters 99 on Fort Riley.
Yeah.
What happens is that I grew up part of my life on Fort Riley. My father was a United States Army chaplain. We lived up on the hill, but the original base sits down below, and it was all those buildings that are down there were built in the 1860s all the way through about the 1890s, and they're the old limestone. Quarters 99, there's been multiple families that have lived inside the same housing unit. The buildings were originally designed to be one officer's home, and they have broken those down to like being two family quarters now.
Right.
But the families that have lived in quarters 99 talk about that they'll hear water running upstairs and go upstairs and the bathtub is full, as if somebody was going
Oh,
to take a bath, or they'll hear footsteps coming from the attic level and walking all the way down to the basement. Um, and it's everybody that has lived in quarters 99 experiences that over time. One lady talked about that she thought her husband had come home, that he had left to go to PT in the morning. This would be in the early 2000s, that he left to go to PT in the morning, and he would usually use the basement entrance to come into the house, and she could hear his boots coming up the stairs, and sat there waiting for him to come inside.
wow.
It stopped right outside the kitchen door where she was sitting having her coffee, and she just kept waiting, and finally went and opened the door thinking that he was doing something, and there's nobody down there. She walked all the way back down to the basement. The basement door was locked. Um,
Wow.
she's the same woman that says that something knocked her down the stairs one day from the first floor to the basement level, that she was
Holy
standing there
cow.
when something brushed past her as if it was
Yeah.
in a hurry going down the stairs.
Wow. Man. Yeah. Then you say Building 99. Where is that?
That's on Fort Riley is where that is. It's quarters 99. It's the same. They call it building 99 or quarters 99. It's
That's right. I remember that in the book
yeah,
now.
on the main post itself, prior to them expanding up onto the hill where
Yeah.
most everything is now.
It's just a building on Fort Riley.
Right.
All right. What about the Lawrence Massacre hauntings?
There are about 5 buildings in Lawrence that are haunted at this point. We frequent a building called the Toy Store. It's a 3-story building that survived the Lawrence Massacre. Um, to give you some background on that, in 1863, on August 21st, a man named William Quantrill raided Lawrence. He brought with him approximately 500 men. Their goal was to slaughter an abolitionist town.
Yeah.
Lawrence was known for its abolitionism. It also had some of the Jennison's Jayhawkers were based out of Lawrence. Jim Lane was out of Lawrence, and so they wanted to kill these guys. And as they came into town, they had picked up a group of Confederate cavalry that came with them. They started out with only 80 of them. By the time they got to Lawrence, there were more than 500. They included
Wow.
Frank and Jesse James were both there. Um, so you've got Frank and Jesse James. You have Bloody Bill Anderson. Some of the most notorious, Cole Younger is there. Jim Younger is with him. Robert Younger was very likely there, even though he was much younger than the rest of the brothers. So you've got this huge group that come in, and they kill approximately 250 men inside the city of Lawrence.
Holy cow.
It is a brutal slaughter. They leave only 3 or 4 buildings standing by the time it's over. It's a nasty event. In fact, it would, for decades afterwards, it would echo through history because of what happens there. But they would leave no one alive. Any males that they found, they killed. There were men that escaped it. Jim Lane actually escaped. Jennison's Jayhawkers were elsewhere, so they were not there when they got there. But the stories of brutality were just amazing to have read through. But the toy store sits on Massachusetts Avenue in the city of Lawrence. It was a main street even then. It is a 3-story structure, and it's called the Toy Store. It's a massive toy store. It's one of the greatest places to take the grandkids to. We go in there and just let them go because they're going to find toys on every floor, things that they'll be interested in. But they regularly hear and see a spirit that is moving throughout the building. Probably one of the men that was killed during that massacre happening inside the city. I do know that just down the street from there is 1313 Mockingbird Lane, which we've advertised for on the show. His original building was haunted as well, and he talked to me about that he would see somebody on a regular basis walking towards the window of that. Now, the building wasn't there at the time of the massacre. In fact, the building that was there on that block was the blacksmith shop. And they actually took 5 men down to where the blacksmith shop was and executed them right where the blacksmith shop was.
Wow.
And so I think that the one that is at that location is probably one of those people that they massacred right there in front of that building, where that store is. But you've got a couple houses as well. One belongs to a University of Kansas professor. It's on New England. Yeah, New England Avenue. It was one of the only ones to survive the massacre, and it belonged to Reverend Cordley. Cordley was not killed in that particular event. He would die years later. And in fact, he wrote one of the best books about the Lawrence massacre that was out there. But what happens is that Cordley flees and hides out in his basement. And they were going to kill him inside. They walked right past him. He could have reached out. He says he could have reached out and touched these men, was how close they were to him. His wife
Wow.
actually drug him out of the house with a rug over the top of him. He crawled underneath the rug while she was pulling the rug out of the house. And he laid underneath the rug, and then they started piling furniture on top of that to continue to hide him. The current owner of the
Holy
house
cow.
talks about that the house itself, he sees people all the time. In fact, he sees a balding man that walks down the stairs. And so I think that based on the description he's given, that's probably Reverend Cordley even years later coming down that. But it's left this bloody history on the city
Yeah.
itself. Um,
Wow. Yeah, I am sure. And they have, other than the seeing the ball man, they have other sightings there as well.
yes, they sure do. In fact, when we do our tour, we do some ghost hunts along the tour routes as well.
Uh-huh.
That one there, they do right inside it's called now I got to think of what it is. Leslie Park, which is directly across from the town's library.
Yeah.
Now, he was the mayor at the time of the massacre, and his house stood where the city park is today. He was not killed during the massacre itself. He died as the massacre was happening, though, because he and a friend dove into the well underneath the house. And as the house burned down around them, the smoke went down inside the well and killed them.
Wow.
But guests on our tours will get all kinds of answers with dowsing rods as well as
Yeah.
EVPs while they're out there, because he'll visit with them and talk with them and let them know. You can ask him questions. So, did you die during
Wow.
the massacre? And he'll say no. Did you die as a result of the massacre? He'll say yes. So,
Okay. So from hiding in the well. So
right,
basically he's saying, no,
yeah,
I didn't die in the massacre, but because of the
right.
massacre.
But because of the massacre,
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. And so folks, you're hearing it firsthand from Tim, the stories that are in these books. I'm going to show you again where to find that. Go over here to Amazon and type in Tim Shepard, and you can get these in Kindle or in paperback. And I've got like I said, I've got the Prairie Ghost in paperback. I've got the where to go? I was trying to get back over here.
return to the
Come on.
prairie.
Yeah, I've got Return to the Prairie on my tablet, so it's kind of hard to see with you. Get it out of the glare. But anyway, I've got it on Kindle, so you can get them in both formats. And so make sure you go check out his books, get his books. We were going to talk about Christine's books, but like I said earlier, she had oral surgery this week, and so she's not up to doing a lot of talking. But okay, Tim, after those two books, well, Lynn, Christine, y'all got any questions for Tim on those books? I know in private chat y'all been burning it up, and I guess you think that Tim's supposed to be reading all the private chat because you've been asking a lot of questions in there.
Well, one of the questions that I asked is when the lady fell to her death or jumped or whatever at the Capitol, did they see her as before she fell or after she fell? And did they,
Good question.
They see her as before she fell most often. Um, I know that there is a video that will pop up on YouTube occasionally. It's called the Kansas State Capitol Ghost. It is an image of a parking lot when it pops up on YouTube, and it is a woman who she's wearing bell-bottom pants and a fringe jacket, and she is walking across the parking lot. She walks about 30 feet across it and disappears. That is the underground parking garage underneath the Capitol building. It was added in 2004, somewhere right around there. One of the security guards stole the footage of that particular spirit moving across there. And every once in a while, he's able to get it up. Now, I didn't know it originally, but Kansas has somebody that watches social media at all times to see what's going on, including YouTube. And they will get that video jerked down within 2 to 3 days after it goes up on YouTube.
Wow.
and the woman
Wow.
that was unmarried and pregnant, did they ever hear the
In the
baby
theater?
cry? Yeah. Do they ever hear babies cry from the
No,
baby?
no, they hear her crying. In fact, there's a video on YouTube from 2006 where there's a group of investigators that is inside the building and they're having a conversation right in front of the stage. And for about 3 minutes of that video, you can hear her crying in the background. They don't react to it at all. They don't hear it with their ears. It's when they go back and they're looking at their own videos and stuff, they can actually hear her crying. They didn't hear it
Wow.
with their ears. It was kind of neat to see that one.
Yeah, they're at the Jayhawk Theater now.
Right.
See, here was to me the hypocrisy of that era, in that if a woman is found out to be pregnant, she is ostracized and demeaned, and in this situation made to feel like her only option is suicide when it takes two to tango.
Right.
Yeah, but men were not responsible for anything. It didn't matter.
I understand that. I mean, I do. That's what I'm saying. That was the hypocrisy of the era. Did they, and I mentioned that to say, did they ever find out who the father was?
No, not that I know of. So,
Okay. Yeah, that was because, I mean, yeah, I know nothing would have happened to him. I mean, like I said, that was the hypocrisy of the day, and it's sad. And, hopefully, as a society, we've outgrown some of those mores
right.
and social. What's the word I'm looking for? Standards, whatever.
Right.
That says it's got to be this way. But
Right.
I mean, if a woman gets pregnant, she either had to agree to it or not, but there was somebody involved, somebody else
Right.
involved, and he bears as much responsibility as she does, especially if it was unwanted. In the cases of rape and incest and things like that, there is still another person involved, and
Right.
they should be considered as well
Right.
in any actions pursued after the pregnancy. Because most men don't want to take responsibility. But anyway, didn't mean to get off into a philosophical discussion.
So are you planning on writing any more books? I mean, is there any more we can look forward to?
Right now, I'm in the middle of. I had to restart it. I was about 600 pages into a book on William Quantrill and his Raiders because I wanted to look at the history of all of them because there's a huge
Yeah.
history of these men. About 800, almost 900 men rode with him during the 5-year period of the Civil War, most of whom
Wow.
had some very historical backgrounds. You've got a governor of Missouri. You have the James brothers, the younger brothers. just huge. It was an era that produced, this group produced probably about, I would say probably about 10% of them became famous after the war was over for the things that they were doing on both sides, whether it was good or bad. George
Right.
Shepard becomes a sheriff. I mean, it's an interesting group that existed.
Do you have
Yeah.
any favorite stories of your own personally from what you've written so far? Is there any that's your favorite?
I do, and Gina had asked earlier on the Facebook chat about Dorothy, and so I thought I would share this with y'all. Um, Margaret Hamilton plays a big part in The Wizard of Oz, and she was actually the Wicked Witch of the West. Now, Margaret Hamilton was born in Hayes, Kansas, which is about 3 hours from here, um, and she went on to a very illustrious career, both with The Wizard of Oz as well as stage and film. She became one of the early scream queens. We still talk about her in horror movies today. But her first real dark role was the Wicked Witch of the West. And she would make only 5 more appearances in her lifetime as the Wicked Witch. One of those happens in the city of Topeka in 1976 during this huge parade down Kansas Avenue where she dresses up as the Wicked Witch of the West. One of them occurs on a children's television program that probably everybody that is part of this group grew up with. She appeared on Sesame Street sitting next to Oscar the Grouch's trash can in her Wicked Witch costume.
I think I remember
They said that
that.
that episode traumatized children so badly, PBS never aired it again. In fact, there's no copy of that particular one. In season 4
Wow.
of the DVDs, that episode is missing. But PBS, in their infinite wisdom, decided they'd bring her back on another children's television program to correct their mistake. This one was all about pretending. Of course, they bring her back on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, where during the course of 15 minutes, she would put on all of her makeup and costume to show what it took to become the Wicked Witch of the West. They say that one traumatized children so bad, PBS didn't want to air it again either. It is out on YouTube. Let's make that clear. You can find that episode that is out there. One of those happens on the Paul Lynde Halloween special. In 1975, she's on the Paul Lynde Halloween special introducing the band Kiss. She went on to say they were the scariest people she had ever met in her life. This is coming from a woman that was one of the scream queens. I just thought it was hilarious because it does tie into Kansas. Just because you've got the Wizard of Oz here, there are actually 2 copies of the movie out there as well. So when it appears
Yeah.
on television, pay attention because sometimes at the bottom of the screen it says that it's in Topeka, Kansas. Other times it says it's in Liberal, Kansas. Because when the movie came out the first time to the theaters, Topekans threw a fit about it. Dorothy could not have been from the city of Topeka because Topeka has too many tall buildings and rolling hills. It's not flat. So,
Yeah, but she is from Kansas.
right, exactly. Now
So,
we've got about 6 cities that go, Dorothy's from here. And it's like, no, Dorothy is from Liberal. Let's make this clear. It's on the movies.
yeah, liberal Kansas. I remember that. All right. So you've answered the next question. I guess Christine was looking at the outline as to what's next.
Right.
Y'all didn't know Tim had basically finished his book, his next book, and
On the computer.
his computer died.
Right.
And so he's reworking everything. So it'll be out hopefully within a year.
Hopefully within this year. I'm about 150 pages back into the rewrite now.
Oh, okay,
So
good.
we're in there. I've still got a huge amount to do. I have probably one of the most detailed lists of who all the raiders were that is out there because I've compiled it from lots of different sources, and that
Yeah.
was like 100 pages of the book of the original one. So now I've got to type all that again.
Well, Tim mentioned it a minute ago, and I don't know if anybody's noticed this, but
No.
we haven't been pausing for commercials for our sponsors, And that's because they have their own playlist over on YouTube, and I've just been forgetting to mention them. So please go to our YouTube channel and go to the playlist, Strange Journey Sponsors, and you'll see everybody that we're helping out here and their little videos, and we would love for you to visit them. And also, before we go, remember to go to our Strange Stuff page. You can get the watchers, those of you that are watching, but you can also get your I Believe shirts. I believe in ghosts, I believe in aliens, I believe in Bigfoot. What was the ones I was wanting to? I mean, you can see we have tons of stuff. The Krampus shirts, the Angel shirts, Paranormal Investigator. I like Bigfoot, and I cannot lie. And every time anybody sees that, they do sing it. And
I was just doing that in my head. So
Me too.
Exactly. That's the point. And again, just before we go, make sure you check out Amazon.com for Tim Shepard and go check out his books. You can get them on Kindle and on paperback. So, any final thoughts, Lynn?
I can't wait for the next show when we talk to Christina, because I want to know what's going on in hers.
Yeah. Hers is going to be a little different.
I know.
I mean, she was supposed to be on this show, but because of the surgery, she couldn't. But I had already planned, because she can't really tell the story without
telling the story.
So we were trying to figure out a way to break it down. That's kind of why I wanted them both on the same show, so that she wouldn't feel pressured to tell the whole story and could just give us some highlights and some scenes. But we'll figure something out and do a show on that. In our Strange Authors series, we've already contacted Elizabeth Parker, and we have her scheduled for a show coming up in the next couple of months. I'm not sure when it is, but she'll be next in our Strange Authors series, where we talk to, because she has 3 books out. Christine, any final thoughts about Tim's books?
I just want to say, Tim, you're doing an amazing job. Keep it up. Don't let anybody tell you can't do it, because you're amazing. You can do it. You can do anything you put your mind to.
thank you. I appreciate that.
And Tim, final thoughts?
It's been fun. I enjoyed it. Looking forward to next time when we have, I'm trying to think. Next time is going to be Andrea and her husband, John.
Yep. Next show is the Grave Hunter Society, which I was going to share that. Andrea and John, gravehuntersociety.com. Researchers of the obscure and peculiar. So they're going to be our next show in 2 weeks. 2 weeks. We'll have them on talking about all that, because they not only research like property and items and things like that, they also analyze EVPs and videos and things like that for investigators. So, all right, guys. We hate to do it, but it is that time. And like I said, in 2 weeks, the Grave Hunter Society, our other ET, Andrea, and her husband, John, will be here with us. Thank you, Christine, for being here. Thank you, Lynn. Tim, I appreciate you sharing your books with us. And hopefully all of the watchers out there, remember, the watchers, you'll go to our Strange Stuff page, SJ15 for 15% off. Wait a minute. I got to get rid of that. Okay. See you in 2 weeks. Thanks, guys. Bye bye.
Bye.